Assalamu alaikum, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. After long days vacation, we have starting our class. Uh, we are discussing Palo Alto basic courses, that is for PCNSA. Today, we will recap previous classes mainly and include one new topics, DNet, that means the Destination NAT. In last class, we have completed um, SNAT, that means source NAT. So just for recap, just consider you have got one Palo Alto firewall for your organization. You just ask to deploy this firewall in your network infrastructure to secure your user and other devices. So first, you have to power on the device, then connect with your network. Consider this network topology will be this Palo Alto firewall. You have LAN segment, you have DMZ segment, and another is WAN segment. Okay, so your first consideration is you have to make sure accessibility. You have to make sure internet connectivity in every PC and server which is connected in LAN zone and DMZ zone. So this is the first criteria. And next, you will push the some security policies to secure your user and your network devices. Okay, so see, this is the firewall. This is the three segment or three zone is connected here, LAN, DMZ, and WAN. So first one, you have to configure the basic setting. That is, you have to set the IP addresses in individual interfaces based on topology. Then you have to maintain the routing part. You have to complete the routing part. Then you have to go uh, in policies, and last one is net. So in basic configuration, you have to configure IP address. You have to define the zone. You have to define the virtual router. These are three steps you have to complete. Step two, you have to complete routing. So this is very simple. One firewall is directly connected with ISP and other zone is directly connected with your firewall. So it's very simple routing. Just make a default route towards the ISP. That done. Step three, you have to complete the policy. Policy, you have to make sure LAN zone will access or LAN zone have to access DMZ zone. LAN zone have to access WAN zone, that is internet, and vice versa. Okay. So this consideration you put in policy section. Last step is NAT. In your organization, you are using private IP addresses. So you have to convert these private IP addresses to public IP addresses to connect the internet. So in that case, you have to configure the NAT, network address translation. NAT will be two types. One is source NAT, that means inside or LAN to WAN or DMZ to WAN, that will be SNAT. If you connect just server 1.1 or 1.2 from server 1. Server 1 is connected in one zone, and server 1 and server 1 2 is connected in DMZ zone. If you connect from server 1 to server 1 or 1 2, you can configure DNAT, destination NAT. Okay, so first we recap, then configure DNAT or destination. So first, just log in the firewall, number one. Number two, go to the network section. Network is so much slow. First, go to interface section. Here, the interface uh, interface name, and here all interface is connected with firewall as a layer 3, as a layer 3. So define the layer 3 and mention the IP addresses, mention the IP addresses and management profile. Here we using this management profile to permit the specific services like so go to the management section, interface management. In interface management, we are allowing some services like ping, SSH, HTTPS, and remote response values. These services is allowed in management IP addresses. That's why we attach in interfaces, interface management profile. And here's the IP address of interface, and this is the virtual router. By default, all interfaces, all IP addresses in default route table. In default route table, you can configure the separate or different virtual router and include separate interface or individual interfaces to making different route table. So by default, there is no requirement in my topology in different virtual router. That's why I use default virtual router. And last one is security zone. Security zone is 1. So if I go to details, interface, very much fast internet. That's why taking time. Interface name, this is the comment or description. Interface type is layer 3 and security zone is 1, virtual router is default. And you set the IP address. IP address is ISP1-1. Basically, this is a object, address object. Okay, address object ISP1-1. This object means if you go to the object section, addresses, see here ISP1-1 means this IP address 209.165.1.2/30. See here my topology. ISP and Palo Alto point-to-point IP address is 209.165.1.0/30. 11 configured in ISP interface and Palo Alto interface configured IP address is 1.2. This is called the address group. You can use address groups. You can also use addresses. Addresses, you can mention the name behind the IP addresses, or you can directly put the IP addresses. No issue. So see here, I use here addresses by name, but by name, there is a IP address, basically. So set up the IP addresses and other parameters. Number one, in individual interface, you have to set the interface type. Management profile, this is optional. You can set or not. That depends on your requirement. You can access your Palo Alto firewall through this IP. So in that case, you can set the interface management profile. The IP addresses, virtual router, and last one is you have to set the zone, virtual router, and you have to set the security zone. Okay, this is very plain and simple. The WAN interface, Ethernet 1 by 1, and DMG interface 1 by 3. These are directly connected and there is no sub interfaces. But in LAN segment, there is two VLAN, VLAN 101 and 102. So there is sub interface. So there is sub interface for VLAN 101. Sub interface is interface ID dot 101 and other interface is similar as 101. So set the interface management layer 3, set the VLAN ID, tag VLAN 101, 102, virtual router default, and zone will be LAN. Zone will be LAN. Okay. So this is the address and interface configuration. After address configuration, you can go the zone section. Basically, in zone section, before the configuration, you have to first go the zone section and create the zone, or you can set here, no issue. So here, see the zone, LAN 1, DMG, you can add another zone. And see here, LAN zone, there is 3 interfaces, 2 VLAN and loopback, 1 zone, 1 interfaces, and DMG, 1 interfaces. Then virtual router. In virtual router, we're making the default route. There is virtual router is default, and in default virtual router, all interfaces is in default virtual router. All interface is in default virtual router. And we're just making one changes here, that is static routes. Default static route. Default static route is towards the ISP or internet, towards the ISP. And this is the SLA 1 SLA configuration. So this is the default. So we're just finished 2 sections. One section is interface section. Number 2 is routing section. Number 3, policy section. In policy section, you will see security and net. First, we'll go security section. Security section, number 4 and number 5 by default will be in here. And you have to define new security policy before this default policy. The first one, if you permit traffic from LAN to WAN, you have to place a security policy, LAN to WAN. Just example, LAN to WAN security. That is already discussed in previous class. You have to mention the name, then source, Source is LAN zone. Source address, you can mention the source address. I don't mention here the source address. Any source address means any source address will be here. Destination is one zone, and you can mention also application. I don't mention any application here. All application is allowed. Service, all services, that means application default services is allowed, and action is permitted. Action is allowed, and that will be logged. Okay, then this is the default policy. There is no deny. All are permitted. So in LAN segment, PC1 to PC4 can access server 1 through this policy. If I make NAT here, so if I go to the NAT section, in NAT section, there is a different NAT. Is the static NAT, dynamic NAT, and PET. Different type of NAT. So I disable this one, DNAT, destination NAT. So first, disable this one. We first check the static NAT. So enable this one. In static NAT, static NAT means one-to-one. One private IP will be translated with another public IP. So you have to mention the NAT name, static NAT I mentioned here. Original packet coming from LAN zone and destination zone will be 1. And source address is 172.168.101.101. It's a single private IPv4 address. And translated packet section, I have to mention here translation type static, and I have to mention the static translated public IP addresses, which is given by ISP. So this is my private IP address will be translated with this public address. And bidirectional means you are making here source NAT. You are making here source NAT. That means LAN source address will be translated with this IP addresses. If different mechanism will consider, like consider this is a server. So this server you can access in a LAN using a private IP, but in one side or internet, you can access through the public IP. So both direction NAT have to come. So if you want both direction NAT, that means LAN to WAN, WAN to LAN. So click the bidirectional checkbox. No need to make another policy. Okay, so this is the static NAT. So permit the configuration. Permit. So PC1, if we check here, PC1. So PC1 can communicate with server 1. So server 1. Terms, appearance, color. Okay. So PC1 just go, so I will press my 1 1 thing getting P. Okay. So if I try from PC2, that will not work because I make source NAT. That means 1 to 1. Only one PC uh, will, will communicate, or one PC can communicate, not accessing the server one. So this is the static net. This is the static. Okay. Then yes. So what is the dynamic net? Dynamic net is just you consider one pool, one private pool will be converted to or translated to another public. Okay. This is called the dynamic net. So if I enable the dynamic net, just enable this one. The changes is you have to set the name, original packet, LAN zone, destination zone is 1, and source address is a IP block. So I use here 102. That means VLAN 102. These two PC3 and PC4 in this block. So if I make translate with these public IP addresses or public IP addresses block, these two PC can communicate the server one. Translate with this IP. Okay. So this is the dynamic net. Okay. Then commit. PC2, then PC3. Go. Yes. But PC2 will not come because PC2 IP address not in dynamic pool. Okay. It's the dynamic NAT, and another source NAT is PAT, port address translation. Port address translation. That is PAT. So if I enable this one, PAT, port address translation, we need only single public IP addresses. So see here, original packet is will be in LAN or DMG. That will be in LAN or DMG. You can consider multiple zone in same policy as a source zone, and destination zone is one. Source address is any. Destination address is any. Translated packet. Dynamic IP and port. Translation type is dynamic IP and port. That is also called PAT, port address translation. Address type interface address. Our one interface is Ethernet 1x1. Ethernet 1x1, and Ethernet 1x1 have one public address, 209.165.1.2. So all these private IP address in LAN zone and WAN zone will be translated with uh, interface Ether 1 by 1 public addresses. So here the device use port to translate the individual private addresses. So this is called the PAT, port address translation. If I come it here, now we can access from PC2. Also server 1 and server 1 to can access. Enable. So see here, configuration committed successfully. Close this one. So check from PC2. Yes, PC2 can communicate with server 1, server 1 and server 1 2. Yes, both are what? Okay, so this is source NAT. Source network address translation. Now we discuss destination NAT. The requirement is from server 1, I can access server 1 or server 1 2. Okay, so this solution is called the destination NAT or DNAT. Normally, this interface have these public IP addresses and this the private IP addresses. This private IP addresses is not accessible from the internet. So I send request from server 1 to these public addresses. This public address redirect this traffic or redirect this request to server 1 or server 1 2 based on your configuration, which one you need. Okay, so check this one. Consider server 1. Server 1 have IP, show IP interface brief. IP is, this is server 1 2. Okay, server 1 2, no issue. Telnet self IP. That means telnet is enabled here. Telnet self IP, that means telnet is enabled here. Okay, then there's the user ID and password. It's working. That's good. So we make sure server 1 can telnet server 1 2. This is called the port forwarding or TNAT. So consider here. Go to TNAT, enable this one. See here. You have to set the name, any name, user defined name. Other setting will be default. Original packet. See here, original packet is coming. Original packet, that means source zone. Source zone. Packet is coming through server 1. Means packet is coming from server 1. So source zone will be 1. Source zone will be 1. And see here, destination zone. Destination zone. destination zone also will be one, because this public IP basically redirect the request to another IP. Okay, so that's why source and destination zone is same one. Interface is either one by one and service is any. Select here, translated and set here the IP addresses, destination IP address. Destination IP address. This destination IP address is basically in destination interface. That means one interface. You are just said the destination interface is one interface and IP address is one interface IP address in destination address section. Translated packet, destination address translation, not source address translation. Click the destination address translation. Number one. Number two, translated address. Redirect traffic to 102, 102, 100, 102. So set here IP address 102 and you are requesting for telnet. You are requesting for telnet. So apply this one. After completing the NAT section, you have to set a policy in policy section that will allow WAN to DMZ. WAN zone traffic permitted to DMZ section. So for this, WAN to DMZ, say here, WAN to DMZ, set the name, source. Source zone is WAN, destination zone is DMZ, and destination address is WAN public IP address, WAN interface public IP address. Application, you are just requesting for telnet, so set the application, that is telnet. Telnet. Telnet will be there. Yes. Telnet. So telnet is allowed. No need to set any in service or URL category section, and actions is allowed. Then you have to place the we need to send a telnet request from server 1. This server. From server 1, you are sending request in private IP addresses or public IP addresses. Public IP addresses, right? This one interface IP address 209.165.1.2. Wait for commit. Configuration committed successfully. Plus send request. Yes. Cisco. And I'm sending request from server 1. Server 1. Now I am in server 1. That is happened because of DNAT, destination NAT. So that's all for today. Any question?
No, sir.
Okay. So next class will be tomorrow. Next class will discuss after next section The topics will be topics will be this one, 3.1, traffic visibility. Okay, Allah Hafiz.